Anirban, Chandan, Jayashri, Jayesh, Mayank, Rajiv, Shubhangi, Suhani, Varshini, Vikas. So while we are waiting for others to join in, it would be great if you can just share it in the chat box. Which company are you representing? Which city are you from and your designation? So can I just have some responses in the chat box? So Akash is from Noida, Rajiv is from Delhi, Mayank is from Max Health, so Vikas is from Bangalore, Manish is from MK, Jayesh is from Pune. So thank you for the responses. So I'm Khushbu Shah, Insight Sales Manager in Meteonic. So before we deep dive in, let me quickly introduce Meteonic Innovation Solution. So with over 18 years of experience, 300 unique clients, including 500 Fortune companies, Meteonic is a trusted leader in DevOps and DevSecOps solutions, seamlessly integrating security into your software development results in up to 30% reduction in vulnerabilities, fortifying your digital assets. So I would like to thank everyone who have joined this session today. So the session will be on harnessing SBOM, so where we'll explain you about the essential insights for modern software security. So in the webinar today, we'll explore how SBOM empower organizations to address India's emerging compliance mandates, build trust with stakeholders, and elevate their security posture amid growing regulatory demands. So before I introduce the speaker for today, I would like to welcome everyone who have joined late. And if you have any questions during the session, please post them in the chat box so we don't miss on any of the questions. And in case if you like the session today, and if you want a more detailed demo with your team, I'll be sharing the link at the end of the session. And you can just fill up the details. So you'll be given the first priority for the demo. And then there will be a quiz at the end. And in the quiz, whoever wins the quiz, we will be giving goodie bags to the participants. So let me introduce the speaker for today. So we are excited to have Amir Shahmiri, sales engineer at Ment.io. Amir is a cybersecurity expert at Ment.io, specializes in software supply chain, security and vulnerability management. With extensive experience in SBOM and open source security. So Amir helps organizations strengthen compliance, reduce risk amid evolving regulations. So he's basically known for his practical insights. He's dedicated to enabling secure, transparent software practices across complex development environment. So before we go ahead with this session today, so there will be 4 poll questions, and I would love if all the participants participate into it. So Pooja, can you just launch the first poll? So the first poll is like, do you currently use SBOM in your organization software security strategy? So we'll give few more seconds before we end the poll. So the maximum, the answer is no, we don't use SBOM. So 36% people have answered we don't use SBOM, and rest 21% is yes, extensively, yes, but not consistently. We plan to start using them. So the maximum participants, they are not using SBOM. So Pooja, can you launch the second poll? So which area do you believe SBOM can benefit your organization the most? Can we have some more responses? So the maximum people have 30% people have answered risk management and vulnerability tracking. Compliance and regulatory requirements 25%, software supply chain transparency 19%, and managing open source components 19%. So the maximum people have answered the first one. Pooja, can you launch the third poll? How much of an impact do you think SBOM will have on your organization's software security strategy in the next year? The maximum 76 participants have answered high impact. Moderate impact 12%, low impact 6% participants have answered, and no impact 6%. So Pooja, can you launch the fourth poll? So the fourth poll is SBOM are beneficial only for small scale organizations with limited software. So is it true or is it false? So 80% participants have answered false and 20 have answered true. So thank you all for participating in the poll. So over to you, Amir. Now you can take the session ahead from here.
Thank you so much for that. So great to meet you all. As alluded to, my name is Amir Shahmiri. I am a sales engineer at Men.io, where we specialize in proactive application security toolings and giving you the ability to be able to handle application security in an efficient way. Now, I'm going to start by sharing my screen, and we're going to be walking through a very quick presentation into SBOMs and walking through how they can help you in your journey of application security, and obviously making sure that you're meeting your compliance requirements and your governmental requirements there also. So within just a moment, you should be able to see my presentation. Please let me know once you can see it. Just a comment in the chat box would be fantastic. Fantastic. All righty. So, as we suggested, my name's Amir Shahmiri. I'm a sales engineer at Mend. The agenda for today is to go through SBOMs, understand what they mean for organizations, the current challenges we see with SBOMs, and sort of the actions that we can overcome to actually go through these challenges and be able to move forward. At the end, we'll have time for questions and answers, so feel free to put some questions in the chat there as well, so I can make sure to answer those questions as and when we face them. Now, what is an SBOM? So the way that you can think about an SBOM is essentially an ingredients list for your software that you're developing, right? We're creating these incredible pieces of software daily, and we need to have a standard to be able to understand what these softwares actually contain. What are we using within our applications? What OSS components are we using, and why are we using them? It gives us visibility into these dependencies, but also giving you the information around the security risks and the licensing. So it becomes a standard across the organization or even across the industry to be able to say, okay, I've got a list of all of my items that I'm using within this application. Here are the security issues that they can face, but here are also the license and compliance issues that they can have. Meaning that you can get a concrete list of why and what you're using within your actual applications, but have it in a standard that can be understood universally. Now, when we take a look at the key components of SBOMs, you can see it gives you a list of dependencies. So it doesn't just give you the ability to see the direct dependencies, but it gives the direct and transitive. We get to understand which versions of these dependencies are we using, again, giving you insight and visibility into the different version ranges that are out there. So again, giving you direct information about how you're using these dependencies in your applications. It gives us the license information. So obviously compliance is a massive part. We need to make sure that we're not using any licenses that can cause us issues. And we've got the ability to track these licenses with the software bill of materials there too. And last but not least, we get the vulnerability information as well. Now, as we know, open source dependencies can have vulnerabilities, and we need to make sure that we have full visibility into these vulnerabilities when we are using these dependencies. And by having software bills of materials, we can have those vulnerability details within the actual SBOM, giving us the insight that we require to be able to understand what the issue is and essentially what we need to do about it as well. Now, when we take a look at an example software bill of materials, you can see we get some really key information. Now, it's not in a human readable format, it's more of a machine readable format that we can see here. But if we break down the information in the actual software bill of materials, we can see some information that can give us an insight as to what's going on. For example, at the top here, you can see the SBOM data author, who's created it, when it was created it. So essentially it gives you the timestamp, the date, the person that's created the actual software bill of materials. We have the component names, so obviously breaking down the components that we're using, the versions, the suppliers, unique identifying information. So for example, the SHA-1 hash for the specific dependency. And then you can see down here, we also give you the information on the relationship there as well. So you get some really key information in these software bills of materials, but as I alluded to, they're not really able to be read by you, right? They're used as a standard across the board, meaning that if we share a software bill of materials with a partner or with another company, they should be able to digest this information in that standard too. Now, software bills of materials aren't just a fad. They're something that's very, very important when it comes to application security. Here are some stats that we can see. Around 70% of security teams are relying on SBOMs for vulnerability management. So that's a huge number, right? So we need to make sure that we are using software bills of materials if we're not doing so already, to make sure that we are staying ahead of the curve and making sure that we are utilizing sort of requirements there too. Now, when we take a look at organizations, 50% of you are using actual software bills of materials to sort of report improved security, right? We had issues with an earlier software bill of material. Here with the vulnerabilities, here is how we're fixing them. So again, it gives you a linear tracking step to be able to have the history of your progression when it comes to security. Now, if you haven't started to use software bills of material, not to worry, 45% of companies are struggling to keep their software bill of materials up to date. And that's something that we're going to walk through a bit later on today, how you can actually automate the process and make sure that you are sort of keeping them up to date in an automated fashion rather than having to do things manually. And when we look at the actual impact, you can see that 65% of developers find SBOMs helpful when it comes to tracking their open source. So at a glance, again, it provides you with vital information to be able to see the visibility. What are we using? Why are we using it? And what is the impact of using these dependencies? And as we know, organizations are getting mandated recently to implement SBOMs. So 30% of organizations are actually being mandated. And obviously there is a sort of initiative in India at the moment to start to use SBOMs when it comes to compliance and regulatory reasons. So we can expect this number to go up and up and up. Now, I won't bore you by reading through all the stats. Obviously, all of the stats are on the screen there, but what we can highlight that SBOMs are very, very important, right? They're not something to be forgotten about. We need to start to understand why we need to use them, what challenges we can face if we start to use SBOMs, and what can we do about these challenges. So let's walk through some of the hidden challenges of software bills of material. Now, one of the main issues that you're going to face with SBOMs is that they focus mainly on software. They focus mainly on open source, right? They primarily cover software that's open source, which means that's only a part of our application that we're actually using, right? In this example, you can see that typically 60% of applications are open source, but we still have 40% that needs to be looked after. Now, whether it's the actual third-party software, the proprietary software, we need to try and make up that portion to make sure that we have the visibility in there as well. So one of the main issues that you would see at the moment is the fact that we're only looking after that 60%. Now, as we saw, they are not human readable. SBOMs are not easily understood by non-technical teams. If you're privy with JSON or XML files, you can obviously go into them and understand what's going on, but they're not made to be able to be read by actual humans. So this does create a technical communication gap, I would say, meaning that if you don't have that technical background, you may not have a clear understanding of your software landscape because of the format of the SBOM itself. So again, visualization of the actual SBOMs is very important. So if you are going to use them, I would also suggest finding tools that can help you visualize this in a human readable format, whether it's via a UI or whether it's via a report, giving you the ability to understand the software landscape and bridge that gap between the security and the non-technical teams to be able to understand what's going on. Now, SBOMs are a static snapshot, meaning that an SBOM is generated once you generate one. It's not something that's continuously updated on its own. So it's looking at a single point in time. So this is why it's so important to make sure that you are constantly evolving your SBOMs with the changes that you're making to your software. Software doesn't typically remain static. Software is updated. You're going to change dependencies, add dependencies. And when you make these changes, you want the SBOMs to obviously reflect them. And due to the fact that SBOMs are a snapshot in time, this isn't a process that's done automatically. And it's something that we really need to make sure that we're looking after in the future. Now, what can we do to overcome these issues? First and foremost, we can expand beyond open source. We can include third-party software builds and materials for better coverage there as well. So whether we're using commercial libraries or whether we're using proprietary libraries, we can have the ability to be able to digest those within our software builds and material. So whether it's asking our commercial sort of partners for their software bill of materials so we can import it into ours, or whether it's finding a tool that can scan commercial libraries there as well, it's paramount to make sure that we have all of the actual landscape covered, not just looking after the 60%, but looking after all of the external dependencies too. Now, this also gives us the ability to gain visibility into critical third-party packages that again could introduce vulnerabilities. So the better chance we have of obviously capturing these dependencies within our SBOM, the better chance we have to reduce the vulnerabilities because we're going to know about the dependencies we use. And also it's important to acknowledge proprietary software because we need to make sure that we focus on third party for now, but in the future, who knows, proprietary software could also be included in software bills and materials. And the whole aim here is to obviously reduce the security blind spots in your software supply chain, making sure we have visibility, making sure we understand how our software is working and what dependencies we're using. Now, as we saw, readability is a massive issue. So when it comes to understanding and reading these SBOMs, it's always recommended to have an alternative to the SBOM format. Now, there are many SBOM formats out there, but most of them are non-human readable. So we need to make sure that we have inventory reports to obviously give us the ability to be able to read the actual SBOM. So whether it's using a tool such as Mend that visualizes the SBOM in the UI, breaks down the actual dependencies you're using along with all of the information you have in the SBOM, but giving it to you in a format that is readable by humans and make sure that you don't have to be technical to read the actual report. So rather than just focusing on the core details, we're focusing on readability and actionability and reducing that complexity to be able to understand what's going on with the SBOM. So we're going to give familiar formats across the board to organizations and obviously make sure that we've got the ability to read things across the organization by all members. Not having one silo that can understand an SBOM, but rather making sure that organizations can access this inventory report very easily. Last but not least, as we saw, SBOMs have a static sort of approach. We scan now, we have an SBOM, and then we need to sort of hope for the best, let's say, because we're not going to scan later on. But obviously, this is a very inefficient process and it's not keeping up to date with the software updates that you're doing. We need to make sure that we are automatically updating the SBOM. So whether it's building these within your CI/CD processes or your pipelines to automatically build SBOMs after every single build or release, or whether it's using tools such as Mend again to be able to generate SBOMs each time a scan is done. You need to have the ability to be able to capture real-time changes in the software. So rather than having static approaches, having continuous dynamic approaches. Each time a change is made, the SBOM is updated and you have the latest and greatest information within that software bill of materials. And again, this will enable you to be able to keep ahead of the security issues by keeping your SBOMs current as your software is evolving and obviously meeting that compliance and regulatory requirement to have those SBOMs up to date as and when you require them. And the way that you can obviously look after your dependencies as well is by using tools such as Renovate, which gives the development teams the ability to be able to update dependencies automatically. So if you're not having an automated approach to updating your dependencies at the moment, I would suggest using Mend Renovate, which is an open source offering as well. But it gives you the ability to identify the dependencies, check for updates. If we find out of date dependencies within your actual application, we'll provide you with those fixes and be able to actually automate that process too. And just to let you know as well, Renovate has more than 1.6 billion downloads from as of now. So it's about among the top 1% of repositories out there. And it's a key element into sort of taking that security burden off your shoulders and putting it on a tool that can help you update automatically and obviously help you meet the requirement of building your SBOMs in a dynamic fashion, no longer having them static. And now it's time where you have the chance to ask me any questions. So feel free to drop some questions within the chat there. I'll take a look at them, see if we have any at the moment. And if we do, we can obviously walk through the questions and answer any requirements that you may have. Thank you so much for listening.
If you have any questions, please put it in the chat box. So Amir, Rajiv is asking which industry is more likely to adopt?
Apologies about that. I wasn't able to unmute myself. Let me just take a look. So Rajiv, which industry is most likely to adopt? All industries. So obviously SBOMs aren't industry sort of specific. Anyone that's developing software will benefit from a software bill of materials. It's something that is required at one point or another to be able to keep track of what's going on. So rather than thinking about it as an industry practice, we should think about it as a software development practice, where if we're developing software, the best practice would be to generate an SBOM to have an understanding of your actual list of open source dependencies you're using there and have it in a format that is an industry standard. So rather than thinking, for example, the financial market's going to benefit from this, we can think of it as a way that anyone that develops software is going to benefit from a software bill of materials. Now, Vikash, I can see a question here as well. What information in SBOM helps companies demonstrate compliance with security best practices? Wonderful question. So obviously the ability to first and foremost understand the dependencies that we're using, the different versions that they're using, gives us an insight into the actual breakdown of our application. What are we using to make this application? Now, within the SBOM, as we saw, it gives you the information such as licensing. So it gives us the ability to be able to understand what's going on the license aspect. So when it comes to meeting the requirements for licensing, we've also got the ability to understand, okay, what license ramifications are we going to have by using these dependencies? For example, if it's using a GPL license, what are we going to do about that, right? It gives you the ability to have the vulnerability information, which again helps you meet the security best practices. If we see vulnerabilities within our dependencies, we probably need to check those out. So as a starting point, it gives you the ability to have that visibility. Now, taking a look at the other questions, I can see Milanad, can your tool be integrated with a DLP solution? Can SBOM be similar to data classifications, libraries, and DLP? I'm not familiar with DLP. Would you mind letting me know what you mean by DLP?
So, Amir, I have a question. Where do you see SBOM going? What is the future in the AI world?
Fantastic question. So obviously with SBOMs right now, we are looking at open source dependencies, right, Ankar? So we're taking a look to see which dependencies we're using. Now, with the use of AI and the use of large language models, we can only imagine SBOMs also including the LLMs we're going to use in the future, right? What large language models are we using? What's the ramification of using these LLMs? What security issues do they have? What licensing issues do they have? So slowly but surely, we can actually imagine that we're going to have a list of all of the dependencies, not just open source, but large language models, looking at the proprietary, the commercial ones, and having the ability to have visibility. Now, the number one thing we're trying to tackle with SBOMs is the lack of visibility into what we're doing, right? We are using all of these softwares, we're using all of these dependencies, but we don't have a concrete list of what we're doing and how we're using them. SBOM is trying to tackle that. So I can imagine in the future that the actual SBOMs are just going to grow with what they're covering and give us the ability to be able to understand exactly how we're impacted by the different usage of different technologies.
Thank you. Thank you. Makes sense.
No
I think
worries.
Milan has answered data leakage prevention tool. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So we don't have a direct integration with any DLPs currently, but we do have APIs that you can use Mend for if you wish to take the information out. So obviously, if you're doing a scan, it builds that SBOM. And then I assume within your DLP tool, you'd have an option to be able to upload an SBOM. So rather than thinking of it as a data leak prevention, it's more of a visibility and to help you understand what data could be potentially leaked, right? What dependencies are we using? So they're not correlating together exactly. So they're not tackling the same issue, but they're looking after different things, I would say there.
Okay. So do you recommend it to manage SBOM manually or using some solution?
So SBOMs can be handled by solutions, right? There's many a solution out there that can help you with the SBOM generation. Mend is one of those offerings that can help you with that, right? Every time you scan with Mend, we will create an SBOM for you by default. So it's something that you can do. So there's many tools out there that can help you with that process. Now, automation is the key, right? As we saw, SBOMs are static in time. So if we can automate the approach of creation, it means that we have that dynamic approach of moving forward when we make changes. So I would always recommend automating it where we can.
Thank you.
No worries. Fantastic. Any other questions, team?
I think Chandan has mentioned something, data loss prevention also.
Exactly. I can see Chandan is just, going through the SBOM deals with open source software, exactly, and not customer data. So as I alluded to, they're not working on the same thing, but they're both looking to keep your company secure at the end of the day. Fantastic question. How do we keep SBOMs up to date in fast changing software environments? Wonderful question, Vikas. So as we saw, the static sort of snapshot is the main issue. So to tackle that, you can implement the actual SBOM creation in the CI/CD process, perhaps. So each time we're doing a build or each time we're doing a release, you generate an SBOM then to make sure that you have the actual changes that you're taking place. So in a fast changing software environment, as we see, pretty much every organization is changing code daily. It gives you the ability to automate that approach. So again, each time a build or a release is done, let's create an SBOM and actually have that SBOM ready for us when we're actually making the changes. So if you just do it in the CI/CD process, that would mitigate the risk of missing out on changes and missing out on the approach of having outdated SBOM. No problem at all, Vikas.
Amir has asked one question, like how much assurance is there that the SBOM is fully covering my application?
So at the end of the day, the tool that you're using, you would expect it to be able to contain all of the information. So it depends on the tool that you're using. If you're doing it manually, obviously that's problematic because you may miss things yourself. But typically tools that are generating the SBOM such as ours, they will look for a full list of all of the dependencies. They track the direct and transitive dependencies and give you the ability to be able to understand exactly what libraries you're using there. So you can obviously always verify the information. You can see what the SBOM has generated and compare that against what you have. But typically, you should be able to see a full list of the direct and transitive dependencies there.
There is one more question from Kabu Bakar. How can we create SBOM using source tool like Cyclone DX?
Wonderful question. So there's obviously many a standard out there when it comes to SBOM, Cyclone DX, SPDX being some of them. There are many open source tooling out there. So rather than recommending specific ones and making you don't go down a specific routes, if you do a quick Google search, you can see many a free open source offering to generate these SBOMs. It's a very sort of industry standard thing at the moment, SBOM, so you will be able to find a lot of tooling there. And it gives you the ability to be able to understand how to create them as well. So if you just do a quick Google search, you can see the standards that are out there and see tools that can help you create the SBOMs in those standards. So if you want to use a Cyclone DX standard, just Google Cyclone DX SBOM tool, and you can try and find one out there very easily. I can see Akash has also added a question. What roles do SBOMs play in incident response? Fantastic question. So obviously the SBOM provides us a list with all of the dependencies, right? We're able to see exactly which dependencies we're using. So by having that information to hand, let's say, for example, we have another log4j incident, we can see very, very quickly where we're using log4j because we have a concrete list of the different SBOM, right? For example, within Mend, you would be able to search very quickly log4j and see all of the different projects that meet the actual log4j dependency within the SBOM. So when it comes to incident response, if we have a 0 day, we've got the ability to very, very quickly understand which applications we need to address based on the usage of the dependencies and be able to understand where we need to fix these issues first and foremost. So again, visibility provides us an approach to be able to fix issues because we know where we need to go and tackle these issues. Mayank, I can see we have another question. So we have, how does that Mend SBOM help with compliance audits? So again, SBOM provides you with visibility there, right? So when it comes to compliance audits, you may have a specific list saying you can't use specific dependencies, or you may not be able to use dependencies that are using specific licenses. So again, it provides you with the means to be able to have the actual itemized list of the dependencies, the licensing, the vulnerabilities, the versioning that they're using, and give that to your actual auditor and say, here we go, here is the SBOM. You can see that I'm using XYZ dependencies. Here are the list of the libraries that are actually being used, the versions, the licensing, but also the vulnerabilities. So it's giving you the step to be able to say, rather than manually having to get all of the information, you provide the SBOM in the standard that's required. And then the auditor can go through the information and verify that they are happy with what they see there. So again, the best way to think about SBOMs is visibility into what you're doing, right? That's the number one issue we have. We don't have visibility. So by having that visibility and understanding what the actual landscape is, we can actually start to work on these issues and move forward from them. Fantastic. If any questions do arise, obviously, if you don't have any right now, you can always feel free to reach out to the Metionic team or reach out to Mend as well. We'll be more than happy to obviously advise you on specific practices and help you be able to understand how you can utilize SBOMs within your organization.
So Amir, if any participant wants to see what kind of SBOM they have, can they get a free license?
So that's something that we can definitely organize. If we want to obviously test software bills of materials using Mend, we can more than happy to do a sort of proof of concept, let's say, of where you can walk through the creation of a software bill of materials. So we can definitely utilize Mend to be able to do so. Definitely, Anka.
Okay. Thank you.
No worries at all. Right, I can see some more questions. Rajiv, are DevOps teams already using to some percentage or this SBOM at a nascent stage? So DevSecOps as a whole is integrating SBOMs as a part of the CI/CD process. So you can see that it's something that's already being done. In the stats that we saw there, we saw some great numbers around how many people are using it. So for example, it was 70% of teams, I think it was, security teams are already using SBOMs for vulnerability management, right? So it's already a big part of the DevSecOps cycle. So it's something that is being adopted across the board. And if you're not doing it at the moment, it's something that I would heavily recommend doing in the near future because it gives you the ability to be able to understand and have visibility into your applications. MD, I can see we have a question there as well. How can we use SBOM in application security? Is it best to use dependency track? So dependency track can be used, right? That's a free offering out there as well that gives you the ability to be able to understand your software bill of materials and obviously generate those. That's one method that you can use. As we saw, the creation is one part, but keeping it up to date is the other. So if you are using tools such as OWASP dependency track, it's important that you integrate those in your CI/CD processes, as I suggested during the build and release, to continuously keep it updated, right? So, yep, dependency track is a method that you can use. That's one offering. I would suggest doing some research out there as well, seeing what other offerings there are, potentially using paid offerings as well, so you get further functionality. So you have the visibility, the UI, the additional sort of rich vulnerability database, etc. But there's definitely free tools out there. And as we've seen, it's a large part of application security because it gives you visibility into the vulnerabilities, but also gives you visibility into the actual dependencies you're using, potentially giving you future proofing or future vulnerabilities. Wonderful. Brilliant. I think we are all done with the questions. Metionic team, should we start with a quiz?
Yes. So Pooja, can you just run the quiz?
So we have some goodies to be won here. So please participate and become number 1, 2, 3, and we will send you some. Yeah. Here's the link. Oh, click the link. Okay, there is a question. Is it possible to extract report like this in Excel sheet format? Yes, it is possible.
Heat.
So everyone, please.
Vivanesh Waran, Junior. Papa Boy. Fluffy Slow, Chandan, Mrs. Student. Freak Heat. Sister Space. Sir Heat. Dr. Man. Maying. Mr. Poppins, Ramya. Akash. Lady Fork.
So can you please start?
Quiz.com, Uncle
Play
Bo
and
joined.
What is the primary
Quick
purpose of
aimbot
SBOM,
joined.
software bill of materials, in software security? Listing software components to identify vulnerabilities. New compliance regulations in India emphasize which of the following in software development? Enhanced transparency in component tracking and security. What role do SBOMs play in identifying vulnerabilities in open source components? They provide a clear inventory for tracking and mitigating risks. Which of the following best describes the benefit of SBOMs in software supply chain management? Enhances transparency and security across third-party and open source.
Final question. Double points.
Which of the following is a challenge in maintaining an accurate SBOM for large organizations? Multiple teams using diverse tools and technologies.
Third place, Ramya. Second place, Sirheat. And the winner is Mr. Poppins.
So thank you so much everyone for participating in the quiz. So the winners will be getting the goodie bags from Meteonic. So thank you, Amir, for the insightful session, and Team Meteonic will get in touch whoever has won the quiz and will be delivering the goodie bags. And thanks everyone again for your time. And I'll share one link in the chat box in case if you need a detailed demo, you can just fill in the details and the team will get in touch with you. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Khushbu. Thank you, Amir,
Thanks,
Lois.
Sanjay.
We'll be in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you.